So let's say we want to create a QuickUI control for a user tile, something like what you find in Facebook where you have a picture and a name next to it, and you want to be able to replicate that to show data for different users. Over here, I've got a head start on a simple user tile control. I've got an image tag and a div that's going to hold the name. And what I want to do is hide the details of these DOM elements and their particular structure, their ordering, the way they're defined from anyone that's using my control. I want someone using my control to be able to pass in a name and a picture, but then obscure the details of how that name and picture are going to get used. I want to be able to change this DOM later and not need to have all sorts of applications groveling through the DOM for this control to find a particular element. I want to be able to manipulate the DOM as I see fit later to refactor that UI and insulate consumers of my controls from those changes. So what I want to do is take this user tile class that's going to be generated, a JavaScript class that'll be generated by the QuickUI compiler, and I want to extend it with a name and a picture properties. These are getter setter functions that let someone pass data in and out. We'll do that in a script tag, and we'll start by extending the prototype for this user tile JavaScript class with a getter setter function called name, and that's going to take a name, and then we want to manipulate this div. QuickUI and its runtime ensure that every instance of this user tile class is going to have this dot user tile underscore name reference this HTML div element. So that reference is automatically created whenever we've got an ID on an element. And we can take that reference, pass it into jQuery to get a jQuery object, and then manipulate that element however we want. Here we'll pass in the name. If name is undefined, we'll return the HTML inside of this div. If name is defined, we'll use that to set the contents of that div. So that's our first getter setter function. And we can define the picture one similarly. Here we'll get a reference to this user tile picture element, and we'll set the source or get the source of that image element based on whether or not there's a defined value of this URL. So here we have two getter setter functions. One's called name, one's called picture, and we can use these from JavaScript or we can use them from markup. So let's create an instance of this class. I'll use the attribute syntax here. And these values are going to be passed at runtime to those name and picture functions. If we build this and then head over to the browser, this is our first cut. We see the picture and the text that we want. So this is pretty simple, but we've already got something that's nice and encapsulated. The demo application here that's passing in this data doesn't know anything about how that data is going to get used. That's great. That's exactly what we want. That leaves us free to manipulate this later and not need to go change everyone who's passing data in. This script right now is pretty compact, but we can make it more concise, and that'll make it easier to maintain. We can do that in two steps. One is we can take advantage of jQuery's extend syntax to extend the prototype for this class. And that'll just let us be a little more concise in defining these getter setter functions. We don't have to repeat this user tile prototype bit each time. So that's our first step. And then our next step is to take advantage of some helper functions in the QuickUI runtime that do exactly this work. It's really common to want to set or get the contents of a div or manipulate attributes, things like that. So there's a set of helper functions in QuickUI for that purpose. And these are accessed off a function called element. This is a property factory. And what that'll do is, given a reference to an element, it's going to let us create a set of functions that manipulate that element in different ways. And here we want the function that's going to manipulate the content of that element. And we can do the same thing for our picture. And in this case, what we want to do is manipulate the source attribute. So this is a lot more compact, but back in the browser, if we refresh, we get the same result. So we know that this more compact syntax is doing the same thing we were doing before. And with this, it's just, you can see that it's just really one line to add a new property. This line is going to create a getter setter function in JavaScript that manipulates the content of this element. And this allows us to, if we have lots of elements and we want to expose them all as properties, it lets us do that very concisely. So with that in hand, we can then add a little bit of styling to this control, make it look a little bit more like Facebook. And we get that. That's pretty straightforward. We're styling the top level element of the control as a table and applying a given font. The picture we want to define as a cell in that table with a certain height and width, and the name gets a certain color and font styling. This is the result we get. And we can then create a few more instances of this control in our demo application. So here we've got 3 instances of user tile. The second one here works just like the first. It's passing in some values to the name and picture functions as attributes. And the third example here is just a sample of how you can also use compound property syntax. Each of these properties can also be referenced as a child. And this is a little more verbose, but allows you to include, if you wanted, in here you can include arbitrary HTML or additional QuickUI controls. So with that, we'll load that, and we see that each of these controls is getting rendered. Each of them has an image tag and a div, and it looks the way we want. Again, the key point is that this demo application doesn't need to know anything about how this user tile class is rendering that data. So at any time in the future, we can change this and isolate all of the applications using the control from that change. This is just a key part of QuickUI to create more modular controls. It makes them easier to maintain and easier to share, easier to update.